So last night we had a demonstration that walked down the street and blocked the street, and I don't know a lot of the specifics yet. We are lucky that we have body cameras and a lot of abilities to get to the facts, and so we are downloading all those body cameras now, getting statements, and getting to the facts. As the capital city of California, we have a lot of protests weekly, if not daily, in a lot of times. And there's no doubt that this protest ended differently than the vast majority of the protests that we have, and differently by the fact that there was numerous people arrested at the end. That is not typical in our city, and so we will definitely be getting to the facts. And what we do know is there's some property damage, there were some reports of flames, but at the end of the day, it is unusual in our city for how that protest ended. And so, like I said a minute ago, we have body cameras and a lot of other means to get to the facts. And so we are examining those as we speak. As you all know, that our body cameras are downloaded minute for minute. So if it's a 3-hour body camera, it takes about 3 hours to download. And then we have to review it. So I'd be happy to come back in a couple weeks and give you the update of the facts that we've revealed, but I'd be a little remiss if I tried to guess at what the facts are right now. Obviously, as you all know, and all of you have brought up, we did have a few media folks arrested in that large group, and that is definitely unusual for our city. And so I would be happy to come back in a couple weeks and give you an update.
Okay, are there questions at this point for the chief? Are you going to be here this evening? At least some of it. Okay.
Well, it's just gathering the facts on what led up to it, what decisions were made, and how they were carried out. I wasn't there last night, so that's how we gather facts.
People have been asking who was in charge last night.
We had an incident commander in charge.
Was that a captain?
That's a good question. I don't know who was in charge at that moment, but that's part of what we'll look into.
Had there been any change in the instructions to them last night than previous demonstrations and marches?
Well, again, I wasn't there, so that's part of what we'll be looking into.
What has communication been like between you and the city manager and the mayor? The mayor came out and requested an independent investigation. These are certainly, you mentioned it's unusual.
Well, yeah, we have protests all the time in our city. We're the capital of California, so it's not unusual to have protests on a weekly or sometimes a daily basis here. The protests we've had over the last year, understandably so, have been maybe a little more heated than other protests because of the topics that were being the topics of the demonstrations. So it's not unusual that we have protests. This one is unusual in the sense that there was numerous people arrested, including media personnel, and so that does make it much different than any of the protests that we've dealt with in the past. So I think the mayor's well within his authority and right to be asking questions and wonder why this was different than others.
Have you talked with people to know what triggered the arrest last night? There were the announcements over the course of an hour. Van Chandler saying telling people to disperse, but at one moment, then the arrest started. Do you know what triggered that?
Again, I wasn't there. So have I talked to people? Yes, I've been talking to people all day. But I'd be remiss if I tried to give out facts before I know the facts.
There's some speculation that there were a couple of incidents where there were some run-ins with people, bystanders, and so it was getting a little tense. And then there was some allegations of keying of cars. Have you heard anything about trouble during the march that would have precipitated some arrests?
Yes, there were some cars keyed, but I couldn't tell you how many or where they were at. There were reports of somebody having some sort of device that had flame coming out of it, but again, I can't give you more details than that because those are just stories I heard or saw on the call. And there was some confrontations with some people, between people in the march and people that weren't in the march, but again, I couldn't give you a bunch of specific details about what transpired in those.
When you heard 84 people had been arrested, what went through your head?
Well, that was quite different than before on any other protests. But I will say this, you see when it comes to topics like this and these sort of topics, officer-involved shootings and things like that, come with high emotions. And what we've seen in other cities is violence, property damage where buildings are burning. And I will say this, I mean, that didn't happen yesterday other than the property damage that was reported to cars. But in terms of mass property damage, like buildings burning and people being injured or killed or run over, we didn't have any of that. So, I'm thankful for that. But at the same time, I completely understand people's concern of the way that went down, especially since it's not necessarily the norm for Sacramento. And so that's, as I said at council, our commitment is to get to the facts, and we're more than willing to come back and report that out to council.
We've gone from protesting downtown to in sort of the same general pattern to now specific pockets. The police station, the mall, and now East Sacramento. Do these different situations put officers in situations where they're maybe less comfortable and maybe more unsure of how to act, and that creates more stress? I mean, I know it's a very leading question, but it's...
Yeah, I wouldn't think. I mean, every location for a protest presents different issues, whether it's geography, what the terrain is like, what's the traffic like, things like that. But in terms of making officers more nervous or anything like that, I wouldn't think so.
The comment was that there were more police in riot gear there than people had typically seen before, and that their movement towards the end was more aggressive than it happened before. And there is a lot of question about whether is this a new way of doing things? Was there talk from your level or higher up about how you need to change the way you do things?
Well, we've had numerous protests where officers were in that. It's very difficult for officers to be prepared if it was to go bad, like we've seen in other cities, if they don't carry their gear with them. And so, again, we have to be prepared for what's the worst, and we plan and work together to try to ensure that